Francis Coppola. The EU has anemic growth at this moment. We've tried quantitative stimulation, quantitative easing. It's not working. What can we do now?
Well, I think we should be experimenting with something more radical than that. I think we should be doing helicopter money, just payments to individuals, to households across the whole of Europe, basically to give them some money, particularly at the poorer end of the spectrum where they're likely to spend it, get something moving. I also think that we should be investing far more. I think governments should be taking advantage of the negative interest rates many of them have got now to borrow for investment, to improve their energy security, to invest in renewable energies, in green infrastructure, and their education system and whatever else that they need to do, so that we can start to see some growth, some energy, some demand, some activity, really, across the whole of Europe.
And why has the current QE failed? You've mentioned banks before, and they're not really lending money to what we call the real economy. What's going on?
Well, to be honest, I don't think that QE really encourages banks to lend much. I keep saying that throwing money at banks doesn't make them lend. They will lend if the risk versus return profile is in their favour, and in the eurozone as a whole, at the moment, it isn't. There's an awful lot of depression. There's not very many opportunities for good returns on a long-term basis, which is how banks make their money. It doesn't work. And I actually think that QE makes things worse, because one of the things that QE does is depress interest rates, not only now in the short term, but in the longer term. Banks make their money on lending for the longer term and borrowing short. So they make their money on borrowing cheaply now and lending more expensively longer term. When QE flattens all that out so that longer term rates are pretty much the same as they are now, how are banks going to make any money, and why would they bother to lend? So I actually think we're going in the wrong direction at the moment. I think we should be doing something directly to stimulate the European economies by means of infrastructure development, by means of just giving people money, really, enabling them to spend, so that we can get some energy in the economy. It's just completely flat at the moment.
And do you think there's growing political support for these ideas?
Well, it depends where you look. If you look in the northern economies, there is not a great deal of support for these ideas. They seem to be still firmly wedded to the idea that they only cut back enough, then somehow the growth fairy will magically return and wave her magic wand, and everything will be lovely again. And they look at what they did back in 1984 and they say, look, it worked for us. But I think there's growing support for these sort of ideas in other areas. And there may be growing support for these sort of ideas at the centre as well. We're beginning to realise that maybe this isn't working too well. We are seeing now a bit of a half-open door on more investment across the eurozone. Now we've got the Juncker plan, and there's issues around that. You know, it's very early days with it yet. We perhaps haven't got the projects that we really need to yet. But at least we have a half-open door there. I would like to see us go much further. I think we need much more investment, and I think we also need specific stimulus in the form of just giving people some money, really.